He said he needed space, and I waited. At first, I waited by the window, half believing I'd see his car pull in like nothing had ever happened. Then I waited by my phone, checking messages, rereading the last one, hoping maybe I missed something, some hidden code that meant he'd come back. And then I waited in silence. Days turned into weeks, and that silence grew so loud it became a voice. And that voice kept whispering one thing: he's not coming back. But even when the truth was staring at me, I still whispered back, maybe he will. Carl Jung once said, "We meet our destiny on the road we take to avoid it." I didn't understand that at first, but now I see. I spent so much time avoiding pain, clinging to hope, refusing to accept the absence, that I walked right into the truth I feared the most. He never came back. And somehow, that's what saved me. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something simple. Drop a comment below and tell me, where are you watching this from? I love seeing where this story reaches. It reminds us that we're not alone in our healing, even when it feels like we are. Now breathe. This isn't just a story about heartbreak. It's a story about awakening, a story about the long, uncomfortable, beautiful process of realizing that someone's absence can be the greatest gift of all. Because here's what no one tells you. Waiting hurts more than letting go. The maybe can destroy you far deeper than a no. And it's not the person we hold on to, it's the story, the fantasy, the imagined ending we thought we deserved. I used to believe he was just confused, that he needed time, that one day he'd knock on my door with teary eyes and trembling hands saying, "I never stopped loving you." And I'd cry, and we'd hold each other, and everything would fall back into place like it was always meant to be. But the truth is, the door stayed closed. My phone stayed silent. And one day I had to stop checking, not because I stopped caring, but because I started cracking. Something inside me was breaking, not just from the pain, but from the waiting. And that's when I began to understand. The pain wasn't growing because he left. It was growing because I refused to leave the moment he did. I stayed, in my mind, in my heart, in that invisible place where he still existed. And that place was killing me. So I began asking myself, what am I really waiting for? His words? His apology? Closure? Or am I just afraid of what happens when the waiting ends? The truth is, waiting can be a form of denial, a way to keep the fantasy alive. Because if he comes back, maybe I won't have to rebuild. Maybe I won't have to look at the wreckage. Maybe I can skip the grief, the silence, the emptiness. But Jung taught us this: we cannot heal what we refuse to face. And sometimes the only way to face the truth is to stand alone in it. I remember the day I stopped waiting. It wasn't dramatic, no big revelation, just a quiet moment. I was pouring tea and suddenly I felt it. He's not coming back. And for the first time I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just nodded, as if my soul had been waiting for me to finally catch up. That's when everything started to shift. Because when you stop waiting, you start returning. Not to them, but to yourself. The girl I was before him, she had dreams. She had rituals. She had joy that didn't depend on someone else's presence. I lost her while I was waiting for him. And now, it was time to go find her. But before we talk about healing, let's talk about hope. Because false hope is a powerful drug. It keeps you from grieving. It gives you a reason to delay your own resurrection. You keep telling yourself, I'll start living again when he comes back. I'll feel better once we talk. I just need answers. But what if the answer is silence? What if the answer is, he's never coming back? I know that hurts. I know it shakes your chest. I know it feels cruel. But what if that's not cruelty? What if it's clarity? What if the very thing that shattered your heart is the thing that's setting your soul free? Let's be honest. When someone truly wants to be in your life, they don't leave you guessing. They don't disappear when it gets hard. They show up, they stay, they fight. And when they don't, it's not because you're unworthy. It's because they weren't ready. Not for your love, not for your truth, not for the depth you brought into the room. And maybe that's the real heartbreak. Not that he left, but that you stayed hoping he'd return to a version of you that no longer exists. So if he did come back today, What would he even find? Would he recognize the woman you've become? Would you still shrink to fit the shape of his silence? Or would you finally look him in the eyes and say, I waited, I hoped, I begged the universe. But now I see, you leaving was the only way I'd ever come home to myself. Because the truth is, I didn't need him to come back. I needed to come back to me. And every moment of silence, every unanswered message, every sleepless night, every echo of, maybe he's just busy, was preparing me for this exact realization. He never came back. And that's exactly what saved me. There's something sacred about silence, especially the kind that follows heartbreak. At first it feels unbearable. It presses against your chest. It fills every room, every minute, every breath. It's not just quiet. It's absence. You feel like you're drowning in something you can't even touch. But with time, the silence starts to speak, not with words, but with truth. It tells you what no one else will, that maybe the person you've been missing so deeply was never really the one, that maybe what you truly missed was the feeling of being chosen, the illusion of being safe, the fantasy of being saved. And that's when it hits you. You didn't want him back. You wanted the version of yourself that felt lovable when he was around. That's a powerful realization, because it changes the whole story. It flips the script. It makes you stop asking, why didn't he come back? And start asking, why did I abandon myself waiting for someone who already left? Carl Jung believed that our unconscious wounds are activated in the people we fall for. That love isn't just romance. It's a mirror that shows you what you're still searching for, what you're still afraid of, what you still haven't healed. And sometimes the person who leaves is the final messenger. Their absence is not a punishment. It's a message that says, you're ready to come home to yourself now. Let's be honest. How much of your love was actually fear? How much of what you called passion was just anxiety? How many moments did you convince yourself that tension was chemistry, that longing was love, that confusion was fate? We romanticize waiting. We tell ourselves that the longer we endure the silence, the more meant to be it will all feel when they return. But what if the story isn't about the one who returns? What if it's about the one who awakens? Let's talk about power. Specifically, the power of absence. When someone leaves, they create space, and that space can be terrifying. We want to fill it immediately, with distraction, attention, rebound relationships, anything to avoid the void. But Jung taught us that the void is where rebirth begins. You don't become whole by filling the silence. You become whole by listening to it. So I did something radical. I stopped running from the quiet. I turned off the music, put down the phone, sat in a room with no distractions, and I let the ache rise. At first it was overwhelming. The memories came back fast. His laugh, his hands, his voice. All of it. But then, something softer appeared. My voice. The one I had buried beneath the noise. The one that used to speak up. The one that knew what she wanted, what she needed. She was still there. Faint, but alive. That was the beginning of everything. I realized that his silence wasn't just hurting me. It was freeing me. Because as long as he was present even in my mind, I was performing. I was editing myself. I was thinking in terms of us, even when there was no longer an us. But now it was just me. And for the first time, that felt sacred. Let me ask you something. Have you ever mistaken silence for rejection? Because I did. I thought his absence meant I wasn't enough, that I had failed, that I had pushed him away, that maybe if I had been quieter, prettier, more patient, less emotional, he would have stayed. But what if silence isn't rejection? What if silence is protection? What if the universe removes people not to punish us, but to preserve us? You see, I didn't realize how much I had abandoned myself until I was alone again. I didn't realize how small I had become, how tightly I had been walking on eggshells, how much of my soul I had stuffed into quiet corners, just to keep the peace. But peace that requires you to disappear isn't peace. It's quiet suffering. And now that I was finally outside of that dynamic, I could breathe again. I began noticing things. The way I carried my body, the tension in my jaw, the way I flinched when someone raised their voice, even slightly, the way I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. That wasn't love, that was survival. And now, I was ready to live. I started asking questions I had never dared to ask. What does safety feel like inside me? What does joy look like when it's not dependent on someone else? What would it mean to be alone and at peace? That last one hit me hardest, because I used to think that peace came from resolution, from closure, from a conversation where everything made sense. But Jung taught that closure isn't something we get from others. It's something we give to ourselves. And so I gave it to myself. I stopped needing a text, a call, an explanation. I stopped fantasizing about the apology that would make it all make sense, because nothing they could say would ever repair what I gave up waiting for them. That part, that healing, that was my job now. And let me be clear, this wasn't a clean, pretty process. It was messy. I cried on the floor. I wrote angry letters I never sent. I deleted pictures, then cried over the emptiness. I questioned my worth. I begged the universe for answers. But slowly, through all of that, I rebuilt. And every day I didn't hear from him, that was another brick in the foundation of my return. He never came back, but I did. To my voice, to my body, to my dreams, to my peace. And it turns out, that was the love story I'd been waiting for all along. Let's talk about something no one prepares you for, the fantasy of rescue. When he left, I didn't just miss his presence. I missed the idea that maybe, just maybe, he would come back one day and make everything right. He would say all the right things, apologize perfectly, understand me without needing explanation. He would rescue me, from the heartbreak, from the waiting, from myself. But that wasn't love. That was a survival fantasy. Carl Jung would have called it projection of the savior archetype, a deep unconscious belief that someone out there will come and fix what's broken inside us. That love will heal the wound, silence the shame, erase the loneliness. And I believed that. Desperately. But here's what I didn't realize. Sometimes the person we're waiting for doesn't come back because we're the ones meant to do the saving. Not them. Us. I wasn't actually waiting for him. I was waiting for relief. And I thought it would come wearing his face. I believed that if he returned, the ache would stop. The anxiety would quiet. The pain would evaporate. But deep down I knew, even if he came back, the fear would still live inside me. The fear of being left again. The fear of never being enough. The fear of not knowing how to love without losing myself. So I had to make a choice. I could keep waiting for someone to rescue me, or I could become the one who shows up, for myself. And that shift, it changed everything. Because once I let go of the fantasy, I saw the truth. The rescue had already started. It started the moment I stopped reaching for someone who wasn't reaching back. The moment I turned around and faced the empty space I had been running from. That space? It wasn't a punishment. It was a portal. A gateway to something deeper. Something quieter. Something mine. So I began the slow, honest work of becoming the person I needed when I was breaking. I stopped waiting to be chosen. I chose me. And it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't Instagram-worthy. It was quiet, raw, and often lonely. But it was real. I began creating new rituals, small, sacred ones. I made tea in the mornings and actually tasted it. I went on long walks without checking my phone. I wrote letters to the version of me who stayed too long, and I forgave her. I told her, "You weren't weak. You were loyal. You weren't broken. You were just scared. You weren't foolish. You just believed in love the way you needed to believe in something." And we, deserved grace. Because that's the truth. We do what we must to survive. But healing is when survival becomes intention. And intention is what brought me back to life. So now, every day, I ask myself, how can I show up for myself today? Not in some grand way. Not to impress anyone. But in the small, intimate moments that no one else sees. Because that's where healing lives. Not in the big declarations, but in the quiet reclaiming of your time, your voice, your truth. Jung taught us that individuation, The process of becoming whole is not about perfection. It's about integration. It's about welcoming all the lost, scared, hurt parts of you back into the center, holding them, seeing them, loving them. And I started doing that. I welcomed back the version of me who cried on the bathroom floor, the one who begged for answers, the one who felt unlovable, invisible, disposable. And I didn't try to fix her, I just said, I see you, and I won't abandon you again. That was the turning point. Because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering who you were before the forgetting. It's about returning to the self you buried under the weight of almosts, maybes, and what-ifs. And in that return, there's power, there's freedom, there's love. Not the kind someone else gives you, but the kind you give yourself when you finally stop begging to be rescued. So let me ask you something. If you stopped waiting today, who would you become? If you stopped believing the rescue was coming, what would you start building? If you stopped hoping they'd come back, how would you start coming home to yourself? This isn't easy work, but it's holy. Because the real love story isn't about who comes back. It's about who rises when no one does. When he stopped showing up for me, I had two choices: collapse or start showing up for myself. I didn't know how at first. I'd spent so long waiting on his attention, on his love, on his approval, that I didn't know what to do with myself when it was just me. No distractions, no tension, no drama to decode or messages to read between the lines. Just me. At first, the silence felt brutal, but then it became beautiful. Because when there's no one else left to perform for, you finally get to meet yourself honestly. Not the version of you curated to be loved. Not the one bending and shrinking and softening just to feel safe, but the real you. And I started seeing her, piece by piece. I saw the girl who used to write poetry just for the thrill of her own words, the one who would dance in her bedroom with no music, the one who laughed too loudly, cried easily, dreamed recklessly. She had gone quiet over the years, not because she disappeared, but because I stopped listening. Now, I was listening again. And the more I showed up for myself, the less I longed for his return. Because every day I chose myself, I remembered what it felt like to be whole. Jung believed that when we stop identifying with the roles we were forced to play, we reconnect with the self, not the ego, not the mask, but the true center of our being. I wasn't his girlfriend anymore. I wasn't the heartbroken one either. I was becoming something new. Someone new. And the best part? I wasn't doing it to prove anything. I wasn't trying to glow up so he would regret losing me. I wasn't hoping to run into him so he could see what he missed. I didn't care about that anymore. This was mine. My healing. My space. My life. And the power that came from that? Indescribable. I started creating a life that didn't depend on anyone showing up for it but me. I made my mornings sacred. I learned to cook, not because someone else would eat with me, but because I deserved meals made with intention. I started dressing for how I wanted to feel, not for how someone else would perceive me. I began setting boundaries that didn't come with explanations. I started saying no, not with guilt, but with peace. Because here's the thing. When you stop waiting for someone to come back, you stop living in pause. You press play on your own story, and that story gets really, really beautiful. Not perfect, not pain-free, but real. So real that even the sadness has a place. Even the loneliness becomes a teacher. Even the echoes of why wasn't I enough turn into reminders that love was never supposed to be earned. It was supposed to be shared. Let's talk about that for a moment. How many times did you try to be enough for someone? How many ways did you twist and bend and contort yourself, hoping they'd finally choose you fully? Now ask yourself, did they ever really see you? Or did they just enjoy how easily you disappeared to accommodate their needs? It's a hard truth, but one you must face. Some people don't come back not because you weren't worthy, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. And the version of you they were used to, the one who tolerated everything, accepted crumbs, smiled through silence, no longer exists. You became someone their absence couldn't reach anymore. And That's real closure. That's how you know you've healed. Not when you feel nothing, but when their presence or their absence no longer defines you. Carl Jung once said, "We don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's what you did. You faced the darkness. You felt every ounce of it. And in doing so, you became the light you were waiting for. So now, here you are, still standing, still breathing, still showing up. And maybe, even beginning to feel joy again. Joy that isn't loud, joy that doesn't scream, joy that sits softly in your chest, like a candle flickering gently in a quiet room. That's the joy of returning to yourself. You know what else came? Clarity. Clarity about what I actually want now. Not someone who checks all the boxes. Not someone who texts back fast or says all the right things, but someone who sees me, who meets me in truth, who listens, who stays, who knows how to sit in silence with me, because I no longer fear it. And I also know this: I'm not afraid to walk alone anymore, because I did the hardest thing already. I let go of the fantasy. I buried the version of me who waited by the phone. I honored her. Then I released her. And now I walk forward, not in bitterness, but in freedom. So if you're still in that place, if you're still waiting, still hoping, still checking their page, still counting the days, know this: it's okay. You're not behind. You're not weak. You're just not done with the waiting yet. But one day, something will click. Something will shift. Not outside of you, but within. And you'll whisper to yourself like I once did, "He's not coming back, and that's okay, because I've finally come home." To myself. So this is where we are now. Not at the end of a love story, but at the beginning of something far more powerful. A self-story. The moment when you finally stop needing someone to come back, because you realize you already did. You came back to the you that was never broken, just buried. You came back to the voice that was never weak, just silenced. You came back to the soul that had been whispering through all the noise, "I'm still here." And that, my love, is what real return looks like. I used to think love was about presence, about who stayed, about who kept showing up. But now I know. Real love begins when you show up for yourself without needing anyone to do it first. Carl Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important." And what could be more important than finally seeing yourself clearly? Speaking your truth back to your own heart? Living a life that no longer waits for validation but breathes because it's yours? Let's take a moment and honor how far you've come. You went from replaying old messages to writing new chapters. From searching their name on social media to searching your soul for truth. From counting the days since they left to creating days you're proud of. Just for you. That's no small thing. That's transformation. That's healing. And it wasn't always graceful. It was messy, confusing, exhausting. You probably questioned yourself 100 times, cried when no one saw, held yourself at night because no one else would. And still, you kept going. Still, you kept breathing. Still, you kept believing deep down that this pain had a purpose. And now you see it. The person you are today didn't come from someone loving you perfectly. She came from being left and choosing to rise anyway. She came from being forgotten and choosing to remember herself anyway. She came from the silence and turned it into her sanctuary. So no, he never came back. But you did, and that's what saved you. That's what rebuilt you. That's what allowed you to create a life not based on who stays, but on who you are, with or without anyone else. And if someone enters your life now, they're not entering a void. They're meeting someone full, someone sovereign, someone who doesn't ask, "Will you love me?" but says, "Here is my heart, whole, messy, open. I don't need you to complete me, but I'd love to share this space with someone who knows how to stay. And if they can't, you don't shatter anymore. You don't beg. You don't chase. You bless them on their way and keep dancing forward, because now you know what it means to belong to yourself. So let's leave this journey with one final moment of truth. Place your hand on your heart again. Feel it? That's yours. That rhythm, that warmth, that life. It doesn't belong to someone who walked away. It doesn't depend on who texts back. It doesn't change based on who stays or leaves. It's yours. And you are home. Right here. Right now. So if this journey moved something in you, if any part of this story felt like your own, I want you to do something brave. Leave a comment below. Tell me what part of this story cracked you open. What line stayed with you? What moment felt like your mirror? Let's remind each other that we're never healing alone. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Because I believe there's power in stories, in feeling seen, in walking through pain together. And if someone you love is still waiting by a door that's never going to open, share this with them. They don't need to wait for anyone to come back. They just need to remember how to return to themselves. This isn't the end. This is where you begin. And I'll leave you with this final whisper from Jung. Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. You looked inside, you woke up, you came back, and now, you're free.